Hey everybody, I'm Lakey,
And I'm Rachel.
and welcome back to Unfazed. So this past week, Christless conservatism has been on full display through politicians that all of us know and some of us love. And in an interview with NBC's Meet the Press, former President Trump gets squishy on abortion. Republican Congresswoman and quote unquote conservative Lauren Boebert gets handsy with a Democrat at a family-friendly event. But in a win for the conservative movement, not one but two California school districts ban LGBTQ pride flags from their school and school property. So let's get into it. So I think what we need to just start off with for this conversation is defining what Christless conservatism is.
Yeah, I would say Christless conservatism, at least the way that I define it, is freedom without any sort of morality.
Mhm.
So it's this kind of live and let live mentality that's a more libertarian approach. And so I wouldn't even call it conservatism, but for the sake of argument, we're going to call it Christless conservatism. Because you see a lot of people say, we just need to let people do whatever they want. As long as it doesn't affect us directly, then they can do whatever. But unfortunately, that's just not the way that society thrives. I mean, we have to have boundaries and morality. And I would also say, too, you have so-called conservatives and Republican politicians using Christianity as a campaign pitch.
Mm-hmm. And, I think it's very important to note that all these people, Lauren Boebert's the one we're going to be talking about today, but it's not just her, it's so many others
Yeah.
who will say, oh, yes, I'm a Christian because they're playing to their base.
Yeah.
And I think, looking at what is conservatism, at its root, conservatism is upholding Christian conservative values that America was founded on. So if just because you're a Republican does not make you a conservative, because if you are not for supporting the nuclear family, if you are A-OK with gay marriage, transgenderism, you name any of the policies that are more socially liberal, if you're okay with that, but you fall under a fiscal conservative view, you're not a part of the conservative movement.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. And this is why I'm so against this whole big tent party idea.
Yeah.
There's no point in calling ourselves conservatives. There's no point in having the Republican Party if it's just going to be like diet liberalism, diet progressivism. I mean, the whole point of conservatism is conserving the things that Lakey just talked about: the nuclear family, opposing the LGBTQ mafia,
Right.
supporting life, and not, being squishy on it. And so if we're not doing that, then we're really not conserving anything, and we're not conservatives. We might be libertarians, we might love freedom to some extent, but I think true freedom comes with boundaries and morality. If you don't have that, it's not going to make society thrive.
Right. And, people will say, well, what America was founded on, those Judeo-Christian values don't even really come into effect because the founding fathers weren't true Christians. But if we look at what the founding fathers lived by and adhered to, it was the principles that are laid out plainly in the Bible.
Right. And I mean, even if not all of the founding fathers were actually Christians, they at least understood that the Christian ethic, Christian morality, those are the things that were going to make society thrive. That's what's made not only America thrive, but Western civilization up until now. I mean, the most successful republics, or not even republics. I mean, you don't have to have a republic to be successful. I know that's kind of a hot take, but even these Western societies that aren't necessarily like democratic or whatever, it's the Christian ethic that has made them thrive for so long.
And I think the one thing to point out is if we look at every country that has started out living by those Judeo-Christian values, they have thrived. And now if we look at the countries that started there and are moving away from that, we're not doing too good. America's not doing good. England is not doing good. Like the countries that did have the Bible and did have, more Western civilization, and they're leaving everything that they came from, we're now seeing them fall.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, because a lot of the people that advocate for these things don't even realize what they're advocating for. Like they're advocating for things that are truly just causing the detriment, the downfall to society, and yet they think we're crazy for wanting to bring back what made society thrive, because they say, oh well, this country was founded on racism and white supremacy and like all of these horrible things, and it's just too traditional and all of this. But in reality, that's what worked, and that's what has made human civilization thrive up until now.
Right. And it's not been good politicians that make citizens thrive and civilization. What am I trying to say? Civilizations. That's not what makes civilizations thrive.
No.
What makes civilizations thrive is a true love, respect, and a true knowing of God in society. So I think, we see all of these politicians who come in to office and they are championing, even the Democrats are championing, God, like, oh yeah, I'm a Catholic, or oh yes, I'm this.
Yeah, so Joe Biden claims to be this upstanding Catholic, and he's extremely pro-abortion.
Right. It's like every single person in office in America typically will say they are for God in some sense. Even if it's Ilhan Omar and she's for God, but that's Allah in her book because she is a Muslim. But everybody adheres to some type of religion typically because they want to reach some sort of voters. So I think that what we are seeing is it's not about the politician. It's not about what they say. It's truly about what people believe. And unless we see a revival in this country, a true revival where we get back to the Lord, we need a fourth great awakening. And until we see that, America is not going to be better, because we did have 4 years of Donald Trump. And I think he is the best president of modern day in my lifetime.
Yeah.
And even though we had him and he was a great president, even though we had the House, we did not have the Senate, we got nothing done. Like, Republicans accomplished nothing. The country was more divided than ever. Black Lives Matter was at its all-time peak. It's been more about race. It's been more about political division. It's been more about political parties than ever before. So unless we see a true unification on the actual principles of the Bible, there will be nothing.
Yeah, and that's the issue, is like, of course, we believe in voting. We believe in advocating and fighting this culture war because they go hand in hand. Mm-hmm. You cannot look to a political savior because it doesn't matter who it is. They're not perfect. We're not perfect. No. And so they're not going to have a perfect solution. Now, what I do think is important is fighting this culture war, because I believe it was Benjamin Franklin was the one that said that we have a republic if we can keep it. And part of keeping it is having a moral people. It's only going to survive if we have a moral people. And our country has fallen into rampant degeneracy. Obviously, that's not true of everyone, but the vast majority, at least, I mean, what's in the mainstream, it's rampant. It's sex without consequences. It's LGBTQ. It's abortion on demand for whatever reason, because I'm inconvenienced by the, decision that I made and the consequence of that. So, that's where we're at. And I totally agree with what you were saying.
Yeah. It's especially rampant among our generation.
Yeah, for sure.
You know the exact number. How many people are not church affiliated? Like, what percentage?
It's like, it's over a third. It's 34% of Generation Z identify as religiously unaffiliated.
And I think that goes to show where we are as a society. And kind of getting into this, we're going to play you guys a quick video of Donald Trump. Mm-hmm. Over this past week, he had an interview with NBC Meet the Press.
Yep.
And he was basically he talked about a lot of things, but the part we're going to focus on is abortion. So we're going to play that quick clip for you guys, and then we will get right back to it.
Mr. President, I want to give voters who are going to be weighing in on this election a very clear sense of where you stand on this.
I think they're all going to like me. I think both sides are going to like me.
What's going to have to happen is you're going to have to
listen. You're asking me a question. What's going to happen is you're going to come up with a number of weeks or months. You're going to come up with a number that's going to make people happy, because 92% of the Democrats don't want to see abortion after a certain period of time.
If a federal ban landed on your desk, if you were reelected, would you sign it at 15
weeks? Are you talking about a complete ban?
A ban at 15 weeks.
Well, people are starting to think of 15 weeks. That seems to be a number that people are talking about right now.
Would you sign that?
I would sit down with both sides and I'd negotiate something, and we'll end up with peace on that issue for the first time in 52 years. I'm not going to say I would or I wouldn't. I mean, DeSantis is willing to sign a 5-week and 6-week ban.
Would you support that? You think that goes too far?
I think what he did is a terrible thing and a terrible mistake.
So what do you feel like was the main thing that you looked at and was like, okay, how could he even say that as a Republican conservative front runner?
Well, I find it frustrating. It's not just Donald Trump. I find it frustrating that there's not a single Republican candidate on the national level, and it's extremely rare even on like a local or state level, that will openly admit the end goal is to ban abortion completely, have equal protection for the unborn.
Yeah.
So that really frustrated me.
That's scary to say.
Right. And so I would say the fact that he was not willing to just answer the question when she kept pressing him on, would you support a 15-week ban? He kept acquiescing. He would not actually say, I support this, or I would sign this into law, or that's not far enough, I want a heartbeat bill, or I want it banned completely. He would not say that. And that really frustrates me as a voter, because my number one issue is abortion. Like, until we stop murdering the most innocent among us, like, we're never going to get back on track. And so I consider myself an abortion abolitionist. I want it completely abolished, no exceptions. I want equal protection for the unborn. I want the same laws that apply to us on murder to apply to the unborn.
Yeah, which Donald Trump would not even do. We didn't play you guys the whole interview. I really encourage you guys to go watch it. But he was even asked, she said, do you think, Mr. President, that an unborn baby, she used the word fetus, so do you think that the fetus has the same rights in the womb that are guaranteed to people that are born under the Constitution? And he wouldn't answer that.
Yeah.
And I think this is what we're seeing is the pattern of what Donald Trump does. And we are not sitting here saying we do not think he was a good president. We do. I don't think he's what we need.
No.
But the pattern is in the midterm elections, every Trump-backed candidate either lost or fully just underperformed. It was a close race, and they were supposed to just destroy the competition. So, and Donald Trump did not say, maybe I need to reevaluate what I'm doing.
Your strategy.
My strategy. Rather, he said that all midterm elections were a result of radical pro-lifers, and that is a direct quote. So I think you guys should definitely look into that as well, and look at those old interviews he's done on that. Because I don't think that we should be blaming people who want to see every American have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness be to blame for midterm elections that were not good.
Well, and every single time a Republican candidate starts getting soft and trying to appease both sides, they usually don't win, and they don't get anything done if they do win. And I think with Trump, clearly he's the front runner based on the polls and the polling data. And so his campaign strategy at the moment is to campaign for the general election. And in a true primary, you situate your campaign strategy to really focus on the voters of your party.
You want to adhere to that.
Right. But in a general election, you have to try to at least pull in some moderates. So you have to widen that a little bit. But the solution is not to start equivocating and acquiescing and not actually being firm on your beliefs. And so here's my thing. If if you've got like a Democratic voter who does not like Trump and their main issue is abortion, why on earth would they vote for Donald Trump if he's going to, give a little bit more on abortion than what another Republican candidate would give, when they can just get what the Democrats are already offering? Like, they don't want the watered down Trump version. They just want what Joe Biden's offering, even if his, economic policies are crippling them, or even if the, country is going to hell in a handbasket. It doesn't matter, because they don't, that's their number one issue. And I don't think there's a big enough group of people that fit that demographic to even make it worth it for Trump to start trying to water down whatever his views are, which are still unclear.
Yeah. Well, and here's the truth of the matter too. If you're a Democrat or a person that voted for Joe Biden, and you're looking at the way the country is right now, and you are not saying that because of Joe Biden's policies, the country is the way that it is, if you are not saying that, you're not going to be won over in any way.
Exactly. I mean, like, you might pull some independence, but honestly, is it worth it? And another thing I'd like to bring back up, going back to what he said about the midterms and the radical pro-lifers, in my opinion, I don't care if we lose an election if it means helping babies live. Now, I tend to lean more towards just like a flat out abolition bill rather than being an incrementalist on that. But that's kind of how I feel. It's like, what does it matter if we win an election if we have babies being murdered? If we can have a win on that, the election doesn't, I mean, it matters, but like, I would rather help babies and lose an election than the other way around. And another thing that was brought up during that interview is Trump kept saying that there are Democrats that want abortion through all 9 months and even after birth.
Yeah, he was saying that most Democrats don't want abortion from 6, 7, 8, 9 months.
And then
after
he
birth.
said the opposite, so that was kind of confusing.
Yes, but the lady interviewing him kept saying, "Look, Mr. President, there are no Democrats that are arguing for that."
Yeah,
but that actually directly contradicts what's actually happening. We have a couple bills here that we've got written down. So the Maryland bill, it's the Senate bill number 669, and this is a quote from the bill. "Nothing in this section shall be construed to confer personhood or any rights on the fetus."
that's so appalling.
That's literally saying that because this baby is not born, this baby has guarantees to nothing,
and I think
under the Constitution. But people want to guarantee these rights to the people that are literally invading our country through the southern border.
Right. Well, and you have the dehumanization on full display. They use the term fetus because fetus, a lot of people don't know what that word actually means. It actually just means offspring in Latin. Well, if it's a human fetus, if the fetus is like, if I was pregnant and it was my fetus, you're just saying that's my offspring. It's my human being, my human baby. So like, this infuriates me on so many different levels.
Well, and it infuriates me even more too, because Donald Trump, he called out these bills that these places were making. But then whenever the interviewer said, "Okay, well, do you think that a fetus has the same rights guaranteed under the Constitution?" he wouldn't say yes.
Right.
You cannot call out this bill.
It's inconsistent.
It's inconsistent. It's inconsistent morally, legally, logically. The idea of limits at all on abortion don't make sense.
They're totally arbitrary. I mean, Roe v. Wade, that was the whole reason. Like, even if you're a Democrat that is extremely pro-abortion,
right,
from a legal perspective, the entirety of Roe was arbitrary. All of those restrictions that say, okay, well, during the first month or during the first trimester, states cannot have any restrictions on abortion. But then after that, you can do whatever you want. Well, there has to be a point where we all agree there has to be a point where the baby is a human being. Obviously, Democrats will say that it's not until some arbitrary date, whether it's brain function, heartbeat, first breath, whatever. But the most consistent view is conception, because that's when this baby came into being.
98% of scientists would agree.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's like it's just totally what Trump was saying was extremely illogical, extremely inconsistent. And he is right, though, on these bills, because there are these extremely radical bills, like in Maryland, like you said, they don't want to guarantee personhood rights, but then it also prevents investigations and legal penalties for abortion in the pregnancy and perinatal death caused by failure to act, which extends from the 22nd week of pregnancy through the first 28 days after birth. So perinatal means the period after birth. And in that bill, it's defined as 28 days after birth. So that means that if Lakey got pregnant, had a baby, and just neglected the baby after it's born, they can't investigate. No. They can't do anything about it.
In most places, anytime there is a baby that, I mean, heaven forbid, passes away from SIDS or anything like that, that is looked into. It's investigated because you have to hold people accountable. So now, not only is it okay for you to kill your child in the womb, but if you try to have an abortion and that's failed and you leave that baby to sit and suffer and die for 1 hour, 3 days, in some place in the hospital or in the dumpster, they can't even investigate that.
Yeah. And that, and this just goes to show, though, that it's not just about abortion. It's not just about the unborn. People that support that don't value life, and our culture doesn't value life. We are a culture of death. And I think it is very telling how our society treats children, not just unborn children, but all children. And I think that shows that we're really going downhill. And every single civilization that's crumbled and collapsed had child sacrifice in some way, shape, or form. So that's where we're at right now.
Yeah, it's also just the look of not even just the way our society treats children, which is horrible. If we look into how horrible our foster care system is, it's very difficult. Our adoption system is very hard. Child sex trafficking is at an all-time high. But if we just look at other ways that people treat other people, and I don't know if this has been greatly enlarged because of COVID or what, but nobody helps anyone. If somebody is being hurt on the subway, people record that. If somebody drop something. Nobody just helps people anymore. And I noticed that a lot on my college campus of nobody even just holding a door for like a teacher with a bunch of books. It's just a totally different atmosphere that we're in, to the point where I don't think that people they're definitely not valued like they were before. And this goes back for such a long time, because I had to watch a video, I'm pretty sure like every year of my middle school and high school careers. And it was a man, and he would go out and he would say, if your neighbor was drowning and your dog was drowning, who would you save? And every single person was like, oh, I'd save my dog, no questions asked. I don't even know my neighbor. And it's like, okay, look, I love my dogs, but if a person were drowning, I'm obviously going to save the person.
Right. And it just goes to show we inflate non-humans, we inflate animals to the point where it's almost like we value them more than actual human beings. And then we dehumanize actual human beings for the sake of convenience, and honestly just for pure evil. Because there was that transgender person, he's a male trying to be a female. Obviously that's impossible, and he wanted to get a uterus transplant so that he could get pregnant and then abort the baby. That is just, there's no other word for it than wicked and evil.
Yeah. And I mean, in other news, they're also trying to manufacture wombs that are like would be in a science lab. Yeah. And they say that these are for if babies are born really prematurely, which I actually would be totally okay with them if it's for if a baby's born really prematurely. But we know where this is actually going to go. Yeah. It's going to go to making babies in a lab and having them grow, and they'll probably be children of the state, and it's going to be a very wild,
crazy, which we're already starting to see that stuff with IVF. Exactly. Which is a whole other topic.
Right. The California bill, though, they also have one.
I was going to say, which that's not a huge shocker. California has a bill that's similar to Maryland's. This is a direct quote from the bill. The legislature finds and declares that every individual possesses a fundamental right of privacy with respect to personal reproductive decisions, which entails the right to make and effectuate decisions about all matters relating to pregnancy, including prenatal care, childbirth, postpartum care, contraception, sterilization, abortion care, miscarriage management, and infertility care.
Yeah. So I looked up about postpartum care and what all that encompasses. So that encompasses the management of the mother, newborn, infant during that postpartum period. And this period is usually considered the first few days after delivery, but it actually includes 6 weeks after childbirth. So that means in California, you have 6 weeks that you don't technically have to get investigated should your child die.
Yeah, you're not subject to civil or criminal liability.
Mm-hmm. And that's even more protection than the Maryland bill.
Yeah.
The civil and criminal. So you're not subject to criminal charges, but you can't even civilly have anything come about of that. Can't,
right. And this is obviously just infanticide. I mean, it's infanticide even before the baby's born, but this is clear. And it just shows you how radical these Democrats are.
Yeah. And the biggest thing too, I want to point out with this bill about you can't be held civilly or criminally. It says in this bill, based on their actions or omissions with respect to their pregnancy or actual potential or alleged pregnancy outcome, including miscarriages, stillbirth, or abortion or perinatal death. So even if somebody were to actually just neglect their child to death, if they omit that, they still can't even be held responsible for the death of their child.
Yeah. And it just goes to show you what a godless society does. I mean, we're literally at the point where we are okay as a society with born babies being neglected to the point of death or being murdered, thrown away, discarded like trash. And it's like, we're never going to get to a point where we can function as a society, as a country, until we completely outlaw this. It's truly just evil. And I think part of it obviously is cultural, political, policy-oriented change that we have to push for, but it's also sharing the gospel. I mean, you have to change hearts as well. And I think a lot of Christians want to claim ignorance because it's easier to do that, because abortion, I think it's even more, the conversation gets more heated than like transgenderism. And people, and we have experience with that personally. And so, you know, people would rather claim ignorance. Christians would rather claim ignorance, but it's like in Nazi Germany, there were churches that would start singing their hymns louder so that when all these Jewish people were being rounded up and put like cattle into these trains to be shipped off to concentration camps, they couldn't hear the screams. That's what we're doing metaphorically with abortion today. And so we have to stand up, not only on a political, cultural level, but also as Christians and fight for these precious lives.
Yeah, and we're not necessarily singing our hymns louder. We're yelling even louder, God is love, only. And while I do agree that God is love, he is so much more than that. And we're all going to have to answer for that. And just like we're going to have to answer for that, I wish that Donald Trump would have just given us a straight answer.
Yeah.
Because that entire time, whenever he was asked like 15 weeks, no. Okay, well, DeSantis just did a 5-week. And he didn't just say no. He said, that's a horrible thing. And even he himself mentions exceptions. But how truthfully, how can we allow somebody just because they're raped to murder a baby? Even though, like, how is it okay? I just can't make it make sense in my head for it to be okay there.
Is that it wasn't the woman's fault. And it wasn't. I mean, rape is obviously a horrible thing, and we don't want anyone to get raped. But what happens is when a woman's raped and she gets pregnant as a result of that, the crime's already been committed. The rape is never going to go away. The trauma from that rape is never going to go away. Why are we giving the death penalty to the baby and letting the father off the hook?
Exactly.
Essentially, because the rape laws need to be changed about, you know, when it comes to what the criminal penalties are for somebody who rapes somebody else. I think they should get the death penalty personally, but we're putting the blame and the fault on the child who had nothing to do with this at all. And it's obviously not the mother's fault, but there's so many resources, and all you're going to do is add to her trauma, because if she aborts that baby, more than likely she's going to be suffering from a lot of severe mental health consequences on top of the trauma she already faced from the rape. So it's just a lose-lose situation all around, and it gets the rapist off.
Right. It allows sex without consequences, even if that's forceful. And there has been an amazing story that actually came out through Live Action, and they interviewed Leanna Robledo, and I hope I said her name correctly. But she was 12 years old whenever she was abducted and repeatedly raped over a period of time, and she's being held for ransom. They did not get ransom money. They ended up dropping her off somewhere for dead, and she was able to get help, and she was pregnant. And the doctors, as a 12-year-old, she's sitting there, and the doctors come to her, and they're like, okay, you're pregnant, but don't worry. We're going to take care of it. We'll let you have an abortion. You won't have to worry about it. And she was like, whoa. I don't want an abortion. And she's 12. She's like, that is a baby. That baby is alive. And I acknowledge that just because, you know, this horrible thing happened to me, killing the baby is not going to help me overcome this, because now I'm going to have to live with the consequence that I just killed my baby.
And she even said too, like, I know that this baby, that my baby, my child, was put on this earth for a purpose. And she has, I think it's she has a reason for being here. So that just goes to show you, like, obviously the rape was traumatic. Obviously what she went through was traumatic. She was extremely young, traumatic. And I cannot imagine being in that situation. And I pray I'm never in that situation. But abortion is not redemptive. All it's doing is causing more pain and suffering on not only the mother, but obviously for the child, because the child's going to be brutally murdered.
Exactly. And, you know, going back to the interviewer saying, no Democrat is arguing for abortion late term. Well, the Hill reports that there are 10,000 babies that are aborted, murdered every year in late-term abortions. So obviously, just because people aren't arguing for that doesn't mean that, and arguing in air quotes, because people are arguing for that, we just gave you a couple bills, but just because people aren't arguing for that out loud doesn't mean they aren't effectively trying to make that happen. Just some Democrat senators who refuse to name a single limit to abortion that they would support. We have Senator Ben Cardin, Mark Kelly, John Fetterman. Then we have former gubernatorial candidate Stacey Abrams, former reps Beto O'Rourke, Tim Ryan, and there's literally, the list goes on and on and on.
Yeah. And they refused to name a single restriction on abortion that they would support. So that just goes to show you what's going on. And going back to Trump for a second, when he was in that interview, when she kept asking about like basically what kind of abortion restrictions would you support, he just kept saying, we're gonna sit down with both sides, and we're gonna come up with a number that's gonna make both sides happy. And like, I loved back in 2016, I love the fact that Trump was a businessman, and I think in many respects it's a great thing. I mean, trade policy, a lot of economic things, like running America as a business, because that is primarily what America is great. But when it comes to moral issues like abortion, like transgenderism, you can't negotiate and make both sides happy. All you're doing is being squishy. And I think that just goes to show one of the flaws of Trump. Like, I know we're not supposed to talk about that on the right, but Trump does have flaws. Like, clearly he's using this whole, we're going to negotiate and make both sides happy as a way to try to pull in people from the other side, but it's obviously not going to work because they hate him anyway.
Well, and the only thing he's doing is, in an effort to straddle both sides of the fence, you're just going to make both sides angry.
Yeah. Take
a firm stance and piss off one side, but at least they can know where you stand. And then so your voter base can know where you stand, because you know what? If you're going to support a 15-week, but DeSantis is going to support a 5-week, the voters need to know that. Because then, you know, one voter may say, well, I want to actually vote for Donald Trump because I agree with that. Or another person may say, well, I guess I'm going to have to go with DeSantis because that's the better option of the two.
And the other thing, too, again, it just goes to show how arbitrary these stupid bills are, because it's like, oh, 6 weeks, heartbeat, and then, 15 weeks, and, don't forget about 10 weeks and only for this. And it's like, it's so arbitrary. Human life, we know for a fact human life begins at conception. They should be protected. Human life should be protected from conception, from fertilization.
And one of the things that Donald Trump mentioned was life of the mother. I literally would dare anybody to show me a case with an actual abortionist said that they had to perform an abortion for the life of the mother.
Early delivery, yes. Abortion, no. I mean, there are so many, and you know, with the technology we have today, babies are being born earlier and earlier. And are making it. So I think there's been babies born at 20, 21 weeks. That's literally only halfway through pregnancy. So yeah, they might have a difficult time and all of that, but they're still human beings and they're fully intact. They're still developing. They're still growing, just like we are until we're our brains aren't even fully developed till 25. So it's like, can you kill a 24-year-old? Like, how does that make any sense? It doesn't.
Exactly.
It doesn't make any sense. It's totally arbitrary, and it's totally dehumanizing and devaluing human life.
Yeah. And I think, you know, we're seeing now more people acknowledge that it's arbitrary, and more people are acknowledging that it doesn't make sense that you could kill a baby at 15 weeks, but not 9 months.
Yeah.
I think more people are acknowledging that. They just don't care. They're like, oh yeah, I understand that, but I don't care because my body, my choice.
Yeah.
So it's just like we said, it's legally, logically, morally so inconsistent.
Yeah, and again with there's no Democrats advocating for that, and that's what the media always pushes. You know, it was like, well, we want it safe, legal, and rare, but they've clearly switched that to on demand for whatever reason, taxpayer funded, and through all 9 months. And Ralph Northam, who was the former governor of Virginia, is a great example of that, because he just explicitly admitted it.
I have a great quote from him. This was in 2019. So also look at where we were in 2019, because most people thought that this was very recent. Out there. Yeah, and they thought it was very out there. And now we have bills that are being passed where it's like, oh yeah, 28 days, 6 weeks, can't even look into that.
Yeah, the slippery slope exists.
The slippery slope does exist. So he was being asked about what abortion limitations he would put on. Basically, he said none, and this is his quote. If a mother is in labor, the infant would be delivered. The infant would be kept comfortable. The infant would be resuscitated if that's what the mother and the family desired. And then a discussion would ensue between the physician and mother. Literally,
I have no words for how evil that is.
But
they're explicitly saying it. That's the point, is that the media tries to cover it up because they know that like most people even if they agree with abortion to some extent, they don't flat out want like that level of murder going on.
And
and they're admitting it.
And I just like to say the infants aren't kept comfortable.
No,
they're
being neglected.
Yeah, they're neglected. They're in
pain.
They're in such pain because imagine you have poison injected into your bloodstream and then you're actually born, but you don't die, and then you have to suffer for hours on end until you finally die.
And not to mention, they say babies, they can feel that pain. Like babies can feel that pain. And you know, the one thing that a baby wants when it's born is the touch of its mother.
To hear the heartbeat.
And to know the only person, I mean, babies know the smell and the feel of their own mother not only it's already cruel to take the baby away from his or her mother, but then to obviously go in to intentionally kill and then let the baby sit there and suffer a miserable, brutal death. I mean, that is just evil beyond words, truly.
Yes, but in effect, you know, in a way, by Donald Trump not advocating for limitations at all, he's advocating for these things.
Yeah.
Because unless you take a stance firmly on, no, I will not support this. And he said, you know, I don't support late term. But then he also said, well, I believe in exemptions. Well, so really, when do these exemptions, when and where do they apply? Once again, it's a slippery slope that I think we could even see with Donald Trump.
Yeah, and so all that is to say, you know, Donald Trump is not perfect. We need to elect better, truly Christian candidates, truly conservative candidates if we want to see any change on the political level.
That takes us perfectly into one of the candidates we're going to be talking about today, Lauren Boebert.
Yes, Lauren.
So, and you know what? I really liked her whenever she first came on the scene. She was fresh. She was new.
She was feisty and fiery.
So in your face. And I do appreciate that, you know, to boldly proclaim truth.
Yeah.
But she has had a few things happen recently. The most recent thing that happened was actually this past week.
Yes.
We know she's going through a divorce, and she was caught literally getting handsy. And we would play the video, but we're like, no, we don't even need to see it again.
No, it's disturbing.
Yeah, it's mutual consensual groping at a family event in the community.
Yeah.
And she literally does this with a Democrat.
A Democrat.
Like, what?
When I saw this video, the first thing I thought was that's extremely embarrassing because, I mean,
even if
it was a Democrat, it'd be embarrassing, although I'm sure they wouldn't have much embarrassment. There actually was a Virginia Democrat running for a state rep position who is under fire because she made some pornography with her husband.
Yeah.
And now she's like claiming that if you are talking about it, just talking about it, that you're sexually assaulting her and sexually harassing her.
Don't make it.
And she literally made it and uploaded it for money on the internet. So
like literally don't make it. If you don't want people to talk about it or see it, don't make it. And don't try to get money out of it.
So it's embarrassing, obviously, for Lauren, but it's frustrating too because she's one of these people who comes out and says, I'm a Christian. We have to stand for truth. I'm a conservative. I'm pro-gun. I'm pro-life. I am against all this transgenderism crap.
She pushes being a mother.
Yeah, being a mother, being a wife and all of that, a small business owner, all of this stuff. And yet here she is doing things she should not be doing with a man she's not married to, especially while going through a divorce.
Well, this is a great quote just to show how Christian she is. And this is going back to politicians running for their conservative voter base by using the word Christian as a label. And, you know, we can't judge her soul. So I'm not going to 100% sit here and be like, oh, yeah, she's definitely not saved. But her actions are not showing it. But this is her quote. It says, it's time for us to position ourselves and rise up and take our place in Christ and influence this nation as we were called to do. Clearly, like I said, she knows her voter base. It's a Christian conservative voter base.
Right.
But I don't think that you are positioning yourself and taking your place up with Christ by sitting in a room with a bunch of families getting it on pretty much with a person. Like that is while you're still married. Yes, you're going through a divorce, but this is how we have people like
Well, even the fact that she's getting divorced is sad.
Right.
And is not indicative of the values that she claims she has.
Well, and this is how we get politicians like Nancy Mace, who
get
invited. Yes. She's a Republican lawmaker. She gets invited to say the prayer before prayer breakfast. And she literally is making jokes about how she was laying in bed with her fiance. So she's not married. She's clearly lives with her fiance, and then talks about how he was trying to have sex with her that morning, and she couldn't do that because she has to go pray first, and she'd come back.
Prayer breakfast.
Yeah, but she'd come back later. It'd be fine.
And she'd see him later that night, and he'd be all right. Like, again, it's just it's making a mockery of what many people hold dear, like our values, our Christian faith. If you're really a Christian, you hold those things dear, and these people just make a mockery of it. I mean, honestly, at least the Democrats are overt about it. But these Republican politicians, all they do is use it as a campaign pitch, a campaign slogan. They're like, I'm the Christian conservative candidate that supports Donald Trump and bringing prayer back in schools. And then they're going off and doing what Lauren was doing or what Nancy Mace was talking about.
So yeah, we need to have better candidates, that are running. But more than that, we need to pick better. Like we need to
run better candidates.
And we need to run better candidates. Like if you're in the position to be able to run and you are a true God-fearing, Bible-believing Christian, then you need to run. If that is something you feel called to do, like it's time to stop complaining. It's time to just do.
Yeah. Like I get that everybody has different strengths and weaknesses for sure. I get that. But ultimately, as the body of Christ, like we've got to step up and be involved in the political realm as well, because it's not something that is reserved for the secular world. I mean, that's why we're in the place that we're in. And we don't expect politicians to be perfect. Exactly. We don't expect anybody to be perfect. Right. However, if you're going to claim to be a Christian, you're going to claim to be conservative, you have to live that out, or I have zero respect for you. And honestly, there's absolutely no point to doing anything that you're doing, because you might vote on some good bills, but I mean, if you're not living it out, what's the point?
Do they though? Because let's look at this. We've talked a lot about abortion. Abortion has been an issue with Republicans since it became legal, and we've not once tried to effectively end abortion everywhere. So politicians are running on these issues, and they're running on it saying that they're a Christian, and they're gonna stand up for your guns and your gun rights, and they're gonna make sure they end abortion. They're gonna do X, Y, and Z. But they don't do it.
Yeah, because they know that they have to run off of these problems never being solved. That's how they get reelected. And I think, while I used to not hold this position, that's why I think term limits are so important.
Yeah.
Because the Founding Fathers did not anticipate at the time us living this long. And we've got people who are literally senile, who can't even communicate effectively in office. And even aside from that, even the younger people like Lauren Boebert, like Nancy Mace, they are continuing to just get reelected and make a career out of politics because there are no term limits. And once you get up there, you make good money and you get a lot of notoriety and all of these things. So they want more money, and that's why they can't fully fix the problems that we have, because they've run off of it. So I think we have to get we've got to do something about term limits, because I think that's the only way we're going to get
100%
some progress, at least in this area.
Yeah. And the Founding Fathers didn't expect people to live that long. They also just didn't expect people to make politics their career. Like, we need to be asking ourselves why people who've come into politics started off with probably upper middle class salaries,
or maybe even not that wealthy.
Yes. And now they're millionaires. And why are people throwing millions of dollars of their own money to run a race, to win, to get a job that's only going to pay them $170,000 a year? That's the questions we need to be asking ourselves.
I agree.
And, another thing too that's really important to look at this is we have a lot of Republicans who are defending Lauren Boebert, who are defending Donald Trump, and they're saying all of these things like none of this is a big deal, but the Republican Party is supposed to be the party of morals.
Yeah.
So if we cannot stand up for the basic morality of human life, for the basic morality of the nuclear family, and the basic morality of, don't have premarital sex, like that is literally in the Bible. As a Christian, just don't do it. If we can't even stand up for that, how can we still be champions of morality? And how can we call out Democrats for wanting to trans the children, for wanting to take away all of our guns, for wanting to push X, Y, and Z, if we ourselves are pushing our own things that are unmoral?
Exactly. Like we're basically, I don't even call myself a Republican. I vote Republican, but I'm a conservative.
Exactly.
The Republicans happen to align the best with my views and beliefs, but ultimately we're just one step behind the Democrats, maybe a couple steps behind the Democrats. I mean, like you were saying, look at what happened with gay marriage. You had Republicans and Democrats up until a long time, including Obama and Joe Biden, who were against gay marriage. They didn't believe that that was the way the country should go. Many Republicans, when you started hearing chatter about gay marriage potentially becoming legalized, a lot of Republicans said, no, we shouldn't do this. But then you had some like, well, just let them get married. Like, it's not that big of a deal. And a lot of Republicans warned about, and conservatives especially.
Conservatives warned. Republicans, more libertarians, they were like, it's
whatever.
fine.
But the real conservatives is what I meant. They were warning of the slippery slope. This is going to lead to horrible things.
Right.
So then gay marriage became legalized, and look where we're at. That was in 2015. We're in 2023, and we are literally trying to make pedophilia normal. We are literally trying to mutilate children on this altar of gender affirming care and all this crap. And those conservatives are right. And now we see these same people who claim to be Christian, who claim to be conservative, falling for the same thing that happened back in 2015.
Yeah. Well, and the problem is this big tent party idea is that the Republican Party can take anyone and everyone who slightly agrees with something.
Yeah.
That's an
Even
issue.
Just one issue.
Because listen, the Democrats, they don't consider themselves a big tent party. You go in and you adhere to what they have to say and to what they believe. And if you don't believe that, there is no place for you. And I'm not at all saying that we need to like excommunicate somebody I'd rather somebody vote Republican than not. But just because you are a Republican by name or by party does not mean that you are a conservative. There is a difference. There will always be a difference. And just because you are for lower taxes and so you vote Republican, but you're socially liberal, that does not make you a Republican.
No, and it doesn't help our cause. I mean, I think obviously economic, fiscal issues are important, but the social issues are what, to me, those are the moral issues. Those are what we need to really be focusing on. I'm not saying you can't have any disagreement with whatever conservatives traditionally believe, but there are certain things that are non-negotiable. And unfortunately, this whole big tent party idea is just ruining that. And it's really just the reason we have these horrible candidates that are running. And
we don't want diet Democrats in office flaunting that they are Republican. We want true conservatives who will uphold, Republican fiscal responsibility, which I feel like we have lacked, honestly, in recent times.
That's been lacking.
Yeah, that's a whole nother topic of today. But it's so hard, I think, to get bogged down in seeing all the negatives that we have, like you were just saying, the slippery slope of, okay, gay marriage is okay, but, you know what, a 3-year-old can decide now today if they're a boy or a
drag
girl.
Queen can read basically pornographic books to children at school and in the library.
Or, this is actually a legit headline from this last week, a drag queen who has had child sex pornography charges is now like a principal.
Yeah, I saw that.
So and the school district is praising, even though they're getting backlash, they're like, we are standing by our decision. This is great. Blah, blah, blah. Inclusivity is we are taking that to literally be the detriment to children's health, women's health and safety. So it's so hard to get bogged down into all of that.
It gets really depressing.
But there is good news. So this past week, as much as we had some losses, we did have some wins.
Yeah.
And in a state that you would not expect it, California, 2 of their school districts actually banned gay pride flags from flying on school property, in the classrooms. And, some of you will say, well, that's really discriminatory. But I will say what is honestly, I think the best thing about this bill is the only flags that can be flown are any flags relating to the military. So your Gadsden flag is still okay to be flown. Your American flag can be flown. And then the California state flag can be flown. Because those are what has to do with teaching children history about America, about their state. LGBTQ flags and really any other flag that I can think of has no business.
Like Black Lives Matter, that's political. The LGBTQ flag is political.
It's yeah,
and it's ultimately divisive, and it's an agenda. So this is an amazing win, and I think too this just goes to show you, like, even though California, we think of California as being too far gone, and maybe it is, when you really, as a Christian, as a conservative, are facing, I wouldn't necessarily say persecution, but maybe you could call it that, when you're really getting the pushback that people in California and Maryland are getting, it lights a fire, and it makes you really want to push, and like things can get done. And I honestly would argue that a lot of the time these conservatives are getting more done in California than they are in like Tennessee, because
they have to.
Exactly. And in Tennessee we get so complacent because like, oh, we're super Republican state and all this stuff, but there are similar things going on in our schools, even in the most conservative areas of our state. So I think this just goes to show that if we could really get people fired up to fight for truth and speak up and stand out, and realize that if you would just get a group of people together that are willing to do this, you can be effective. So I think this is a great win, and I'm really happy to see that. And I'm really glad that the Christians and conservatives in California are still fighting for their state.
Yeah, well, and California, I mean, not every place is blue. Their two biggest blue areas just have so many people there it destroys. Yeah, the two major cities destroy the rest of the state for the Republicans. So I do feel sorry for them. I don't know how they're still there, staying and fighting. So I do applaud them.
Kudos to them for that, because I don't know. I would, well, and not even just for this. I don't mind the backlash necessarily as much as I mind how I don't know how you afford to live there.
I don't know how you afford to live there, or honestly, like, I feel I'm not a big person like, oh yeah, mental health, but I seriously don't. I feel like I'd be so depressed living there.
Yeah, probably
because every day something so bad is happening. But you know, like Rachel was saying, it's so important for us as people who live in red states to see what California conservatives are doing and how much they are fighting. And we don't want to get like that. So we need to go ahead. We need to be on the offensive, because if you are only playing defense, you're not going to win.
Yeah.
So we got to be on the offense.
That's why conservatives have been losing, is because we're like, oh, don't do that. And then they do it anyway. It's like, okay, we'll get them next time. Like, no, be on the offense. Like,
exactly.
Be aggressive about it. I mean, these things matter. They're important.
And that's why we're here, sitting here having this conversation. We want to be on the offensive and inspiring you guys to be on the offensive, and then forcing us, like doing all this research is putting us on the offensive, learning more about our cause and all this different stuff.
Well, and not to mention too, like, it's really important because the future of our country does rely on us speaking out. And, you know, I get that it's difficult. I get that you've got a lot to lose. You could lose your friends, your family, your job, whatever, but everybody's got something to lose. And honestly, the best friends I ever made were through doing stuff like this, being a part of Turning Point USA, being a part of different conservative clubs on campus and doing activism and stuff like that. Like, I've lost a lot of friends because they don't agree with what I have to say. And that's really sad and unfortunate, but ultimately, I'm not going to waver on my views in order to gain a friend, because your true friends are going to support you and your values. And I think that's extremely important to recognize. And also, too, there's a bunch of people who agree with you that would love to take you in and have a community with you. So don't be discouraged. You really can get involved and speak out. It's not easy all of the time.
No.
Even we struggle sometimes, but we have to do it anyway. And we're called to do it anyway.
Exactly. And I think it's really important, you know, maybe you don't want to go out and be the most politically involved person, because I understand politics is not for everybody, but there are things that you definitely need to know. So, like, you need to know why abortion is wrong as a Christian, and you need to have a good answer for that. You need to know why we should not be, you know, adhering to what are your pronouns, LGBTQ, the alphabet group, like why you need to be fighting against that, and why that's biblically wrong.
Right.
And
if you look at it from like a people perspective, there are people who have fallen into the lies of transgenderism, into the lies of abortion.
Yeah.
Whether they've had an abortion, whether they just think that we should be allowed to get them. All you're doing by using their preferred pronouns and not saying anything about abortion is making the path to hell smooth. Yeah. And ultimately, when you view people as souls that need to be saved, you can't just agree with everything they say for the sake of being loving. That's not loving. Right. Telling the truth is loving. And if you're unwilling to tell the truth, then there's no point in even trying to claim that you're a Christian. There's no point in trying to defend your faith and speak out about your faith, because yes, God is love, but he's also justice. He is a God that loves justice.
Exactly.
And so we're going to be held accountable for our actions one day. And
Christians are going to be held accountable.
Non-believers, yes. So we have to be willing to tell them the truth. I'm not saying you have to be mean, but we can be blunt and we can be bold and we can be loving. Yeah. So I'm really glad to see this thing in California.
Me too. So I'm definitely really very excited. And, you mentioned a lot about telling the truth. And that kind of takes us to like our little last segment of today. And we have a fun game called Is It a Headline? So what we're going on is me and Rachel both have found two very extremely wild stories, so headlines, in the news this week. And then we've each taken a Babylon Bee article, which sounds equally crazy.
The Babylon Bee is a satire, agency. So they do a bunch of satire articles and headlines. They're really funny. They're conservative and Christian. So that's where we're getting them from. Yeah.
So we got our headlines from there this week, and we have to decide which headline is true or which headline is false.
I'm really excited for this.
Okay. So Rachel's going to go first.
Okay.
So she can read me hers.
I've got it. Okay. So the first headline is Democrats complain that illegal immigration is ruining their sanctuary cities. So that's the first one. Okay. And the second one is students writing so bad, one professor says he has to write emails for them. Mm-hmm. Okay, so which one's real and which one's fake?
Both of them seem so real. So I know that the mayor of New York was being like, our city's being ruined, overrun, because they went from 15,000 illegal migrants to 110,000. But that also has a very Babylon Bee-esque writing to it. But also, I'm telling you, I go to college, and I really could see this last one being for real. So I think I'm going to say that the real one is the second one and the fake one is the first one.
You would be correct.
Oh, actually, I'm so sad. No.
My husband actually got it wrong last night when I was testing on him. So while the first one does sound very believable, and that is kind of happening to an extent, Campus Reform was reporting on this. So a biology professor was doing, he was assigning like 4 writing assignments, and they were like 1 to 2 pages long, I think. And he had to ultimately cut the assignments because his students' writing was literally so bad that he could not even understand what they were trying to say. So then they would like email him and try to ask for help and like ask questions about the class and due dates and stuff. And their writing was so bad that he had to start sending out templates about how to write an email in a coherent way to your professor to get help, because he literally could not understand them.
If this is not an argument for school choice, literally, and even the argument of college is a scam, literally, I don't know what else is.
Yeah,
Okay,
I'm ready.
Officials find Michigan woman trapped inside toilet over one stinking gadget. Or Ukraine uses Dylan Mulvaney as new spokesperson.
Ooh, that's hard.
Which one are you thinking, girl? Mine are 2 totally different things.
Well, that's difficult. Dylan Mulvaney has definitely been doing some interesting PR things.
He's pretty cray.
And then, can you read the other one again?
Officials find Michigan woman trapped inside toilet over one stinking gadget.
I feel like that could be real, though, because that sounds like a very Michigan thing to happen. Maybe, no offense to the Michigan listeners.
What's it going to be? Do.
I'm going to say, because I could see the one with the lady stuck in the toilet. I could see that being a Babylon Bee thing, like as a joke about like cell phone usage or something like that. Right. So I'm going to say the Dylan Mulvaney one's real.
You would be incorrect.
Well,
Rachel was stumped. Dylan Mulvaney, that's not true, but I wouldn't be surprised if it happens. Babylon Bee, a lot of their articles will turn out to be real. Like, give it like a week or something.
Right.
So, no. Officials did find a Michigan woman trapped inside of a porta potty. So she dropped her Apple Watch into this porta potty, literally sticks her hand in it.
Oh, that's disgusting.
She gets stuck. She can't get out. And people are hearing a woman yelling from this porta potty for help. So they call 911, and then the fire department comes out, and they literally have to take the entire porta potty apart. I'm like, I don't understand. Like, did she stick her arm really far? I don't know where she stuck her hand because they wouldn't release a name or a picture, which I'm very sad about. But police, yeah, I know. So after this, police literally pull her out of it, and now police have warned to not attempt to venture inside the containment area if you lose an item in an outhouse toilet. Yeah.
I'm just thinking about everything that's in a porta potty. I would have been like, I don't need the Apple Watch.
I do not need it.
That is disgusting. I was really hoping that one wasn't true because of just how disgusting that is. Like, there is no, like, even if it was my phone, I think unless like I was having an emergency, which would probably be gross. I can't, that's disgusting.
Yeah.
It probably would be like ruined anyway.
Yeah.
I still don't think I would go back for it. Like, I would just be like, well, I guess I'm out $1,000. Gonna have to go buy a new phone.
Yeah. I wish that I could say, I feel like we ended on a positive note with the pride flags being banned, and now we've ended on a negative note to know that there are people who will stick their hands in porta potties and get stuck. Like, I want to say it sounds like the Florida man meme, except it's in Michigan, so maybe they need their own.
Maybe they need their own Michigan man, Michigan woman. Meme.
Right, Michigan woman. But I think that that's everything we have for today.
Yeah. We want to thank y'all for joining us, and we want to encourage you to email us any questions at unfacedcommentary@gmail.com for a chance to have your question talked about right here on our podcast.
Yes.
And then also too, if you just want to support us, like, subscribe, leave us a 5-star review on Spotify and YouTube. We're just at Unfazed with Rachel and Lakey. And then if you want to connect with us on Instagram, we're just at Unfazed Commentary on X, or otherwise known as Twitter. We're Unfazed Takes. Mm-hmm. And then Substack, we're Unfazed Commentary. Our podcast is on Substack. A lot of our content's on there, but
be linked below.
Yes, we're going to link all of it below. And so anyway, until next time,
live unfazed. Bye.
Bye, y'all.